Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. In this episode, I'll be chatting with Tana Jean Welch, a poet whose latest book, In Parachutes Descending, is out now from the Pit Poetry series. Her work has appeared in places such as the New York Times, the Southern Review, and Prairie Schooner. Born and raised in Fresno, California, she currently lives in Tallahassee. And she's Associate Professor of Medical Humanities at Florida State University College of Medicine. Are you ready to hear more about her work? Me too. So let's sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
All right, I'm going to start by reading some poems from my book, In Parachutes Descending. It came out in January. And with this book, I really wanted to show how everything is interconnected, how our body shapes other bodies, how we're shaped by bodies, organic and inorganic, as well as by time and location, all of these things coming together to make us who we are and make others who they are. And so one of the ways I did that was to have a narrative thread through the book. The speaker of the poems is a woman who left her husband. They lived in Boston. She left him to go live with an artist, Jane, in San Francisco. So that gives you context for the poems. So from the perspective of the book, she's in San Francisco with Jane, looking back on her time with her husband sometimes. Sometimes she's looking at the present. The first poem is called Boston Underwater by 2100. So the other thing that I wanted to string throughout the book was how things like climate change and global capitalism are also affecting bodies. So this one is called Boston Underwater by 2100. It is an actual news story headline. The first time my husband and I rode our bikes through the Boston Harbor Hotel's arch, a big band on the floating stage played a romantic swing burdened by trombones. And even though everything went to the rent, the grandiosity of the hotel, the rotunda, the yachts and their slips, was our grandiosity. We were easily drinking champagne while discussing Dean Martin's 10,000 bedrooms, because our belief in love was earnest and all we needed. But now the stage is sinking with the rest of our created history. Wistful walks past Alexander Hamilton on Comm Ave, lavender lemonades in Copley Square, the Union Oyster House, our initials carved in stall 19. Once the rain, its tiny pressure on your scalp, like ants passing the door of a tobacconist. Now the superstorm, the surging tides. Now you and I, the satiated bedroom guests we never were, alongside the rest of the humans, wanting more and more from the collapsing ground. Now Faneuil Hall and every corner where we met and kissed, where 1,000 others met, conspired, or exchanged, each body believing their plot the most paramount, each forgetting history and story emerged from the same word, I-story. Now and always forgetting, we build our cities to house myths, our histories to house cities. Soon the sea will claim this reclaimed land, sending these few fragments forever to the drink, leaving the cities, leaving our love, to become something else. The next poem is called Sleeping with Jane, and the speaker is sort of addressing the husband again. Sleeping with Jane. Last night I thought of you while Jane slow worked her tongue and fingers, slow within me an electric kitska dripping beeswax and diamonds and spirals on a goose egg shell, which isn't the same as the way you work me into a never-ending toxin, a layered alarm sounding bomb after bomb. Maybe I should stop comparing lovers. But aren't whole worlds brought into being by association and separation? As if everyone could be Frank O'Hara, as if Boston and San Francisco aren't two tremendous thighs because Harrisburg and Fresno both lack waves, bays, paintings by Richter and Sargent and Neal. San Francisco was warmer, so I lived in the Mission, knowing I'd live in Pacific Heights if I had the money. Now Jane snores as I act on my body alone, pressing all that black, riotous sleep into the quiet form of daylight. A wave on a wave, I've collected you both. So when Jane wakes, I kiss her and think of you, knowing if I were in Boston, I'd kiss you and think of her. Okay. The next poem. In the next poem, the speaker talks about a moment where she brought Jane home to her hometown, which is Fresno, California. Happens to be my hometown as well. And Highway 99 is the highway that runs through the center of the Central Valley. So it's called Highway 99, Jane Visits My Valley. Tiny tooth marks, gnashing a hole in a paper fan purchased at the Fresno Fair. Boys in the cul-de-sac shooting rubber bands and rocks from PVC pipe guns. This is how I remember my childhood. A ravenous static, a static explosion. Killer sharks floating belly up in the sun-bleached fiberglass pool. Blood on the slide, the wasp whipping the back of a knee. The smell of a rattlesnake stripped of its skin. The metal barrette, the light socket. When Jane was in the bathroom and my mother told me to leave Jane, go back to the husband in Boston, because you are not a lesbian. I didn't remind my mother of her own infidelity, the mother-daughter shopping trips to meet her lovers in San Francisco. I didn't say, I never said I was a lesbian. There was only rubble, Jane bending to pick out a scrap of painted shirt as if it were soiled ivory, from a grand piano, possessed of us both and ruined now. This poem's another sort of memory of the speaker's childhood, because I kind of play with how Jane was when she was 12, how the husband was when he was 12, and this one is called At 16, I Was 12. At 16, I was 12 in both body and skill, so that I dropped a note inviting Danny Shubin to the Sadie Hawkins dance and later, after the school gym, found myself pulling his hard cock on top of a guest house out in the country. On the roof of a smaller house next to a big house next to the other big houses next to the golf club. Weeks before, I asked and he said yes, so with money my mother didn't have, I bought matching outfits, Vans, plaid flannel shorts, and Stussy sweatshirts, classic middle California, valley locked, in surf-style clothes. I found myself pulling his hard cock on an outdoor chaise on top of the guest house, or maybe the pool house. A boy and a girl who'd exchanged less than 3 words in their entire lives because I was a girl whose mother did not teach her to speak. So I pulled and pulled at what I didn't know. I only knew his body was tan water polo muscle, and his mother's photo hung in the school's main office. She died 4 years ago, Danny at 12. I pulled like the river pulls the body dumped, pulls it toward the sodden mouth, and like the body I obeyed the current, believing the pulling was the point in and of itself, until he said, I'm about to come, what are you going to do? Having no knowledge of come as naked intransitive, bare infinitive, an infinite end we'd not yet breached, I jumped up and off the chaise, taking my hand with me. I don't know, because I did not. And he did not drive me home that night or answer my calls. Danny Shubin, ghosting before ghosting. So I learned I would never be as luminous as a man o' war, as catching as a cage dancer. Never the one you want. I'm just going to read one more. This poem appears more at the end of the book when the speaker has already broken up with Jane, but she's not with her husband. She kind of goes back to Boston looking for, she doesn't even know what she's looking for. I guess we could say that. called Not This Boston. Bored of my intentional community and all the California artists pretending to keep bees, I went back, longing to see the same city, walked every sidewalk, and waited to feel summer of '07 happy. But Hammersley's was gone. The South End townhouses all belonged to the new breed of women, teaching their babies Spanish while in Subta Conasana. The mother church and her reflecting pool no longer reflected an endless stream of exceptional stars. Everything a dull, sickly, tympanic membrane. So to the North End. I watched an armory combing its bronze bricks, a busker braiding fire, but even that was cold. Not the same city 9 years later, this Boston of my lonely commercial ache, this Boston of the self who forgot the difference a body makes, how yours makes mine singular. Thank you.
Wow, Tana, thank you for that wonderful reading. I was kind of sad for it to stop, but I know we have to get on to the questions and things. I loved the way that your work mixes the quotidian and the erotic. I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing people say that, but I think you do it with just such skill. Whereas I think that could easily go very, very wrong for folks, and you could kind of lose one or the other somehow. But man, you hit it just right. So that was a pleasure to hear you read.
Thank you. I like the way you described it. No one's actually described it that way before, so I wrote it down.
Good, yay! So speaking of poetry and things that we like, I'm interested to know who your favorite metrical poet is.
Okay, what I want to talk about first is not my favorite metrical poet, but my favorite poem in meter, and then I'll talk about my. So it's Aunt Jennifer's Tigers by Adrienne Rich, and in my mind, that's a poem that everyone has to do in like the basic English class in high school and undergrad. Is that true? Like, is it like that one of those poems where you get never tired of because you have to look at it, or is it not?
I know that I had to read it in undergrad, so I think people do. I think it is one. Yeah.
Okay. It is. I just love it because it has everything, and I'll talk more about what I mean by that, but I use this poem anytime I'm teaching, well, because I work at a medical college, so I'm always teaching people who aren't like English majors or writers or things like that. So I use it to teach people not only to write poems, but how to read poems. It's like a really good starter poem, and you can talk about so many elements with this one poem. So I'll read it short, and then I'll talk a little bit more. Aunt Jennifer's Tigers. Aunt Jennifer's tigers prance across the screen, bright topaz denizens of a world of green. They do not fear the men beneath the tree. They pace in sleek chivalric certainty. Aunt Jennifer's finger fluttering through her wool find even the ivory needle hard to pull. The massive weight of Uncle's wedding band sits heavily upon Aunt Jennifer's hand. When Aunt is dead, her terrified hands will lie, still ringed with ordeals she was mastered by. The tigers in the panel that she made will go on prancing, proud and unafraid. So it's just a perfect little package of it's not a happy subject matter, but I feel like I'm talking about it with this spirited voice, but it's in iambic pentameter quatrains, and one thing I always appreciate is that she provides us a really good example of what a stanza should be, especially for people not familiar with poetry. Like, stanza is room. The first stanza where she's doing her needle pointing, and then the second stanza room where we learn about Uncle and his abuse of her, so that's another room. And then the last room sort of talks about how she's not, obviously she hasn't conquered Uncle, but she's gotten through it. So sort of that final room puts both elements together to sort of define who Aunt Jennifer is. The person who does her needle point to sort of deal with Uncle and his tyrannical ways, I guess. The other great thing about it is the meter's pretty perfect, because a lot of times, I mean, I appreciate meter that has more variation and substitution, but this is good for teaching meter because there's not that much substitution in it. And then you have the rhymed couplets. And I like to talk about how the rhymes at the end of the couplets, like it's AABB. And so you have the first two lines that rhyme, those two lines are about the screen and the world of green. It's just that bright image of the tigers. And then you have the tree and certainty, and that's with the men, how they don't fear the men. Like those couplets are yoked in content because of the rhyme, or the rhyme helps with it. The other thing I love about the poem is her word choice and the use of image to convey the meaning. It's also really good for teaching because you can say, what if instead of massive weight, it said the golden weight of Uncle's wedding band? And just changing that one word changes the meaning entirely to something happier or more positive than massive weight. I just think it's like really good for teaching people how to read poems. And then there's alliteration. She yokes the tigers together with the P sound, panel, prancing, proud. So it's a good example of how alliteration can effectively convey meaning as well. The music. So that's my favorite poem in meter.
That is a great one, and I haven't thought of that poem for a while, so that's lovely to return to that one.
And I think the topic is important for discussion, like domestic violence and abuse. We do a lot of that kind of discussion at the medical school, so maybe that's why I'm also more prone to that poem.
Interesting. My look is I'm trying to think back to when we read it in undergrad, but I feel like I've always read it as just like sort of general patriarchy and not necessarily abuse. But wow, now I'm gonna have to like go back and reread the poem. It's even darker than I thought.
Well, it might be just that, but I feel like words like her terrified hands, like that sounds scary. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, no, I could see why it could just be patriarchy as well. I mean, maybe that was the intent, but I also think we could read it both ways, and it still has value. And patriarchy is a form of violence, so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like Rusky's My Papa's Waltz, where when I read it, I see sort of clear abuse, and other people will read it and not see that as so. Yeah. I think that's the amazing thing about poetry, right? That we can all read it different ways, and it keeps us coming back and reading it and seeing different things each time we read it.
I love that too. That's why I don't necessarily like teaching writing. I like teaching literature because we're just reading it, and then the students have so many different interpretations, so we all learn more and more from each other. That is what I love. So yeah.
So I'm going to throw in sort of a random question because I'm interested to know. You work at the medical college, at the College of Medicine. So are the students that you work with all medical students, and is it like an elective that they get to take, or is it something that all of them need to do medical humanities and learn how poetry works?
Unfortunately, my College of Medicine doesn't require it, so they are elective. Some medical schools more and more are requiring at least one humanities class, but it is elective. And I teach mostly medical students. We have a literature class, and then I do creative writing just as like a one-time workshop that people can come to. So that's not a class. And then I also work with the medical students. They edit a literary magazine, and so I do things with them as well. But yeah, it's all extracurricular, unfortunately. Like I feel like I say unfortunately because some of the students that might need that humanities intervention aren't going to pick to take it. But the ones that already kind of get it do take it. So But yeah, I enjoy it.
That's so cool. It sounds really very fun. A fun
It
and
is
necessary
fun.
thing to do
Yeah.
also. So you said you have a
Oh,
poet
my
that you
favorite
want to.
metrical poet.
Yeah.
Okay. It is D.A. Powell. And it's funny because it's for totally different reasons from the Aunt Jennifer's Tiger poem. Because I like his poem. Like nearly every poem he's written in his, at least in his books, is written in iambic bass. But his line lengths can be really long. It can be 7 feet. What is heroic meter? Is it 7 feet? Do you know? I don't
Um,
remember.
I I feel like yes, because in my head I have the number 14, and so I feel like it would be
Mm-hmm.
7 feet.
Okay.
I
Um,
I would not stake my life on that though.
okay. Yeah, but he has different lengths of lines, but that base is always there. But the reason I love it is because I feel like it's so skillful it doesn't call attention to itself. You could read it and not even think about that is it. But at the same time, his poems benefit from that because there's this sense of control and craftsmanship. I don't know. It's like you can really see that there's a lot of time and care put into the poems, and I think it comes through in the final product. And I love that he sort of pairs meter with like profane, contemporary, urban slang, popular culture topics, and so I don't know if it elevates those things, but in a way it does. And then when I think of meter, at least when I was younger, I always associate it with like old things and you know
Right.
tradition. And so this is a very different. At least when I started reading Powell, it was very different. People probably do it all the time now. Um, so that's why I like him. Um, I was just gonna read a poem. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely great.
Okay.
I love just getting to sit here and listen to poems. It's amazing.
This one is an interesting one because I don't think it's from Chronic, his fourth book, and I don't think it's one that you know how poets have like their popular poems,
Hmm.
at least famous poets like J. Powell do, but I don't think this one. I tried to find if anyone ever talked about it on the internet and I couldn't find anything. But it's called Barbershop Talk. The only place left to shave is inside your ears. You are almost perfectly smooth, the way you lie, the way you lift your rump like a powdery tea cake. You are a gelid centerpiece at your best friend's wedding. You are an ice princess of a man frozen in time. Everything you do in time. You arrive in time, you depart in time, but you never save yourself in time. That's the one thing you can't do. Save yourself. And so you shave yourself instead. Back of the neck, chest, nipples, balls. The strop struck with the blade cries the same desperate tone that the soap mug employs. It's a whisking sound. It's a gooey sound. You serve yourself like a creamy dessert. Smooth, remarkably smooth. Somebody should cut you again, dust you and serve you to the bride's stupid sister, stupid enough to believe you as sugar, counterfeit groom. So I'm reading that poem as sort of maybe a jilted lover or like not jilted, but like an ex that just doesn't get it, and it's sort of a statement about the things that the subject thinks is important or how much time is spent on the body when that's not what's important. Um, but I think it's a fun little poem, and the meter is there, and it just gives it just I feel like it just gives it control. A critic did say the way he does meter gives it suggests control while keeping a firm grip on the casual, and I think that's what I like about Dave
Yeah.
because you could see in the Aunt Jennifer's Tigers like you there's the rhyme and the meter and it's just so obviously there and that has a lot of control, but I don't think it's like I don't get casual from that one, but if that makes sense.
I love that a firm grip on the casual. That's that is a that's a great way to talk about poetry and the blending and using of meter in sort of the poetry world that's become very free verse heavy. Um, that it's a skill to be able to use meter in a way that still strikes in the heart of audiences who are used to free verse.
Right, right. And that's why when I was reading the book again for this, I mean, I've read it many times, but I was like, I should start trying to do that more. It just seems like, and then I think, so I used to love writing in meter and form too, because it helped me discover what I wanted to say, which might sound weird since you're limited to the form, but at the same time, that like made me have to think harder about what really needed to be said. And this book that I read from it, I mean, obviously I like it, but it's just more wild, and I hadn't thought of it until thinking about meter for this.
That's um I'm a big fan of meter, I mean, right, like obviously. Um, and have you read the anthology A Formal Feeling Comes?
I don't think so. It sounds familiar, but I don't think so.
It's all women writing in form,
Mm.
and each poem comes with the poet talks a little bit about what writing in form means to her. And there are so many of them that echo exactly what you've said about how writing in form and meter can sometimes help them really get to what it is they want to say, um, better than they felt like free verse was, or even for some of them, it helps them writing through trauma. That
Mm.
if they can focus on the meter,
Mm.
they can focus on the meter and the form, their brain isn't as sort of overwhelmed with the emotions of what they're writing about, and they can get to a better poem that way. So,
That makes
um,
sense too.
yeah,
'Cause it makes it more clinical's not the right word, but more like, for some reason, the idea of building Lego according to the instruction guide, that I don't know why that's what popped into my head, and so you're a little bit removed from um the emotion that would come with it, I guess, because you
yeah.
didn't, it's like someone else designed the Lego. You're just, I don't know, that doesn't make sense at all, but
No, I mean it kind of does though. Yeah, that you're. It is a way to sort of compartmentalize, um, where sort of the logical part of your brain is focused on the meter and the form, and then the other part is can kind of play in the background.
right.
Um, have you so since you mentioned Legos, have you seen the things online where people will take a Lego set and instead of doing what the Lego set is for, they'll build other sort of the goal is to make things as monstrous as you can.
Mm.
So people have taken, like, there's one thing I saw where people took one of those things that was a flower, was meant to be just like the flower in a vase kind of thing. Um, the Lego sets for
Yeah,
adults.
I have some right over there.
Do you have the flower?
Yes, I mean, I have them over there, like as sunflowers and pink roses. They were gifts, but yes.
Like, so people have taken those kits and turned them into like dinosaurs or Godzilla, or they just build other kinds of things with them to make them sort of horrendous. Um, and I feel like where I promise there's a point, where my brain was kind of getting to that is that in a way it is that idea with form and helping you get to what you want to say, because the same bricks can make either thing, and
Mm,
it's your brain putting the form and structure to make the monstrous into the beauty or something.
I like it. No, I like it.
something,
That's
something
good.
like that.
I'm glad we got Legos into the conversation too.
So do you enjoy you must enjoy Legos or you wouldn't have them, right?
I do enjoy Legos, and so the funny thing is, so Berkeley, my son is 6, but Timothy and I, we like Legos, so we're always buying them for him because But then I just realized that it's just because we like them and we should just buy the ones we want. Because he likes Legos, but he hates those books that tell you what to do. He wants to do he feels like the books mean he has to, and he'd rather not. He wants to make his own thing. So once we figured that out, we just bought a box of Legos without the instruction book. So, but yes, I like them. I like the Dreams series. I don't know if you know that one, but
I feel like I have seen them, but I'm a
more fantastical.
I'm into puzzles are my sort of which I guess puzzles you really have to
jigsaw puzzles?
Huh?
Like jigsaw puzzles? Oh, I like those too. We don't do it as much because of the time.
Yeah.
Time is a factor.
Yeah. And space. Because unless you're going to sit down and do 1,000 pieces at once, and who's going to do that really? You've got to have some
that's
space.
The other thing, once we start, we can't stop and we just have to sit there and finish. So
nothing else gets done. So thinking about Legos makes me think about childhood and being younger and things. So I'm curious, it's brought to me my mind, what advice would you have for a younger version of yourself?
I would have so much advice. I will not tell you all. There's so much I have to tell that girl. I wish that I could go back and tell her. But I've narrowed it down to 4 things.
Okay.
And the first one, you don't have to marry the first guy you sleep with. Number 1. Number 2, enjoy your body as much as possible because it's fucking fabulous. And that might sound arrogant, but I did not think I hated my body. And if I could have just enjoyed it and not hate it, I don't know. Number 3, it's okay to be alone sometimes. Number 4, read a lot more poetry. And so I don't know if the advice needed to be related to poetry, but I feel like all those things can relate to poetry because whoever we are influences the poems we make. So I think it's all related.
Very true. So did you not read poetry when you were younger, or just not as much as you feel like
I didn't read as much, and I wanted to write poems before I read them, and which I think might be common for young people, teenagery people, but I feel like if I would have started reading them sooner, I would have been writing better sooner. I guess it's just a time thing, but just trying to help myself maximize my time, I guess.
So if that younger version of yourself could somehow get a time machine and popped into your living room now, what advice do you think that she would give to you?
I like to think that she would be proud of me. This is not answering your question, but I would like to think that she'd be like, "Oh, good, you did all the things you wanted to." But I think she would say, "Don't forget to keep writing and imagining and searching for wonder." And I say don't forget because now that I'm older, I've noticed that I don't know, I get really excited to go to art museums for the first time when I'm younger, and now I still get excited, but it's sort of I've been to a lot of them now, and I think I don't know if it's taking it for granted or I need to be reminded how great it is or how great writing. I think writing is great, but I don't know. I can't describe it, but I think it's something that becoming complacent as you age and forgetting that there's joy in all of these things. And there always was and always will be, even though you've done them. Even with writing, even though I have a book or 2, I need to keep writing to survive. And so just reminding myself that, I don't know. I don't know if anyone else ever feels like maybe they just don't take the pleasure in things that they used to. So I like to remind myself to do it, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I think especially, I'm not in academia anymore, but I think for a lot of folks in academia, it can become just, I got to check these boxes off, so I got to get a poem
Yeah, no, that is
execs or whatever.
exactly it. Like yeah, because I do have these quotas to make for, for the annual review. But yeah, no, I think because before it was more like it wasn't like a struggle for existence, but it felt more like that than now, I guess.
Um, I feel like I had a question that, oh, yeah. So was there ever a time that you stopped writing? Did you ever sort of have a pause on your writing?
I recently had a big pause because I decided that I needed to turn my dissertation into a monograph, and I was still writing, but it was that kind of writing. Um, and so I didn't write poetry during the last year or two because of that book, and so now I do feel like I've had a pause, even though I was writing that other thing, but it's a totally different kind of writing and not as fun to me. Um,
What
so
is what's the topic of your dissertation and now monograph?
the dissertation was post-humanism in 21st century American poetry, and the monograph is about advancing medical post-humanism through 21st century poetry. So it analyzes poems, but then it also uses those to show the value of rethinking medicine in terms of post-humanism instead of regular old humanism.
Oh, wow.
So it was fun to write still because I still like was reading poems and discussing them, but then there was that, how academic writing is. There's that part of it. So
Yeah. Yes, I remember those days. Have you found a home for it yet, or are you still looking for
oh
a
yeah, it
home?
came out in February.
Oh, you can tell how much attention I pay to everything around.
Well, no, I mean yeah, that was the thing. The timing was weird because both books sort of came out at the same time, and I put everything into promoting the poetry book and kind of didn't do the other one as much, but yes, the whirlwind of books.
Um, I'll put a link down in the descriptions then for where folks can get your monograph too, because I'm sure some folks may be watching this and will be interested in knowing more about posthumanism and medical poetry. So
Yeah, and
that was my bad attempt at summarizing what you just said it was about, but
if I don't know how much room is where you're putting this, but if anyone is interested, they could just contact me because it's like one of those books that's really expensive to buy, but you will get it from your library. So I would just, if someone was really interested, I could just send them a PDF of something. I don't know, but yes,
okay.
I know not everyone has institutional access.
That is true. That is true. And sometimes our public library in Tallahassee is pretty good about getting books in when you request them to get something. But I've had them turn me down on a few books.
Oh,
Um,
like that they can't get it.
yeah, so sometimes if it's an academic book and it's a little expensive and they think that um, it'll have a more limited readership,
Yes.
they'll turn me down. But it's okay because they still accept a lot of my requests, and I feel good getting books into libraries.
Yes. That's very cool. Yeah, I forget that. So, I have the university library, and I don't think about how not everyone has the university library. But it's good to hear that the public library is just the same. Like you can get stuff.
Yep. Yeah, you can request them, and then they put you, at least so our library will put you first on the hold list to get the book. So you request it, and then you get to be the first one to read it.
Oh, because it's a book they wouldn't have, and they're getting it because you wanted it. Oh, wow, that is
Yeah.
cool that they do that.
You can feel power, let you feel very powerful.
And that's what you mean by getting the books into the library. Oh, that is very cool. I
Yep.
don't think I have that kind of power at the university, but
Oh, the power of books. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with me today. I've really enjoyed getting to find out about the work you do, and I need to go back and read some D.A. Powell now. I have in the past, but I feel like I want to refresh myself with his work. It was just a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Chronic is my favorite book of his, so I would go there.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun.
What a fun interview that was. I hope you had as much fun listening as I had talking. I just want to show y'all the cover. I know you can see it in the thumbnail, but isn't this great? Look at these little squirrels. Those are some cool squirrels. And I guess because a lot of the book takes place in Boston, and Boston is known for their squirrels, right? I don't know if that was, I should have asked. I'm always thinking up questions afterwards, huh? But I hope that you will go check out this book and enjoy the blending of quotidian and erotic that it has going on. Because it could be so easy for one or the other to overwhelm and one to get lost. And I think this is just a really lovely balance. And I hope that you will check the book out. And check out the Substack that I have, Meter and Mayhem, same as the YouTube channel, where you can actually get prompts that have something to do with each of the interviews. Typically, the interviews will launch on a Friday, and then on Sunday is when the prompts will come out. So if you are watching this the week it comes out and it's not yet Sunday, hold a second, but there's lots of other good prompts there already. And I think I'm going to do one about dramatic monologues for this one. So I hope that you check that out and enjoy doing some writing of your own, inspired by the interview. Thanks for stopping by.